How are you?
Today I woke up late.
Okay, but you're here. That's the main thing. Baruch Hashem.
I made it.
Beautiful. Good morning, Kahal Kadosh. Shavua Tov u'mevorach to everyone. Today, Tuesday, the second day of the month of Tevet, corresponding to the 27th day of December 2022. Today's class graciously dedicated for the Refuah Shelema of a young child, Avraham Ilan ben Elisheva, as well as Refuah Shelema of Esther Bat Victoria and David ben Rosa, among the Holim of all of Am Israel. Additionally, today's class graciously sponsored by Ronnie Safti and family, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved mother, Mrs. Lucy Safdiye, Leah Bat Bahie, Aliyah Shalom. Additionally, today's class graciously sponsored by Eli Levy and family, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved grandmother, Zimbol Margot Laniero, Bat Mazal, Aliyah Shalom. Additionally, by Mr. Ivor Branca and family, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved father, David Ben Shafika, Alav Shalom, as well as by Kobe Cohen, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved mother, Raymond Rahma Bat Yakut, Aliyah Shalom. And also today's class is going to be dedicated to Le'ilui Nishmat, Hacham Yaakov Kassin Ben Altun, Alav Shalom, Zecher Sadik Livracha. I'm sure whenever we come across his Riyat or his Yortzeit, many people remind me, Rabbi, the great Rabbi married me, the great Rabbi taught me, the great Rabbi was my bar mitzvah. So obviously Hacham Yaakov Kassin, the father of the late Hacham Shaul Kassin, the chief rabbi of the Syrian community, really does not need my introduction. Definitely a gadol, definitely a great man, a great Talmid Hacham, a very humble person, but a person with a lot of Yirat Shamayim, who definitely started to draw and paint the demographics and the history of the Syrian community in the United States. Amen. So after we spend a whole week together celebrating Hanukkah and learning about Hanukkah, we're going to come back to the weekly lesson of the Chokle Israel. So we'll discuss today Yosef HaSaddik. Obviously, Yosef HaSaddik, I'm not talking about me, by the way, okay?
I thought so.
No, I know you, I read your mind. Talking about Yosef, the son of Yaakov Avinu, just in case, okay? So, it's a very... it's a very emotional parasha because we see right away when Yosef HaSaddik finally reveals himself to his brothers, and the pasuk begins from the Zohar of today, and it says, "Velo yachol Yosef leitapek lechol hanitzavim alav." It came a climax. It came a moment of literally of such an emotional moment that the pasuk writes clearly, Yosef HaSaddik was not able to literally to control himself in front of everyone that was there. And it says, Hotziu kol ish me'alai. I want the room to become empty. That's the meaning of this verse. Belo amad ish ito. And there was no one with him. Ve'bada Yosef el Ehav. When Yosef is about to reveal himself to his brothers, Rashi says, why Yosef reached a moment that he wasn't able to control himself. Rashi says something fascinating, a beautiful lesson, and it says, Rashi, I'm quoting word by word, לא היה יכול לסבול שהיו מצריים ניצבים עליו ושומעים שאחיו מתביישים והודיעו להם. Yosef HaSaddik has this following question. What's more important? My life or embarrassing my brothers? Why do we say life? Imagine yourself. I'm going to use words to dramatize this encounter. You have Yosef, the viceroy of Egypt. You have the secret service around him. And you have 11 people that you are labeling them spies. What will be the right thing to do? That we don't leave Yosef alone to protect his life. But what Yosef says, I may be protecting my physical life, but what if the moment that I'm going to say, I am Yosef, your brother, what kind of embarrassment my siblings will have to experience in front of Goim? This is what Rashi is saying. So what did Yosef says? I rather expose my life to, God forbid, some kind of threats. Because imagine yourself, now you have 11 unhappy people, especially standing with Yehuda. Yosef has no bodyguards. Yosef has no protection. So it would have been very easy for them to terminate Yosef on the spot. So what does Yosef says? I'd rather go to the risk of being killed by my brothers again instead of embarrassing them in front of the Goim. It's an unbelievable lesson that Rashi brings upon us. And therefore, now, it says, the Zohar Kadosh on this pasuk, which is obviously one of the highlights of the Perashah. So it says, remember yesterday, at the end of the class, we mentioned that the 8th day of Hanukkah brings a tremendous amount of abundance to the person. The fountains of heaven are open. There is an overflow of beracha. That overflow of beracha in Hebrew is called shefa. Shefa, abundance. And I said, make sure that it's shefa and not pesha. Same letters, different meaning. Shefa is something good, something positive. Shefa beracha ve'aslaha, an abundance of blessing and success. But then we have pesha. Pesha means a crime. A criminal, you call him in Hebrew how? Poshea. The action of negligence, it's called pesha. So pesha can become shefa. So we quoted the Sefer Hasidim that explains, which actually is sourced from the Zohar of today. What I mentioned yesterday from Sefer Hasidim, it's quoted today in the Zohar. The Zohar says that the word shefa is a combination of 3 words. The shin of Shabbat, enhancing the observance of the Shabbat, welcoming the Shabbat instead of the Shabbat welcoming the person. That's easy to understand. The ayn of shefa, abundance, is anava, humility. And the pe of shefa is the word pizar. Pizar means to distribute, to give, lefazer. And the pasuk quotes from the book of Tehillim that says, Pizar natan laevyonim, sitkato omedet la'al. It's a very famous pasuk from the book of Tehillim. I think Alleluia. So it says, Pizar natan laevyonim. You know, when you distribute, hamavdil men kodesh lechol. If you want to distribute something, there are many ways of doing it. One of them is like this. Remember, as a child, used to play with the cards. You have soccer cards, the pugs, the Sadiqim cards, Torah cards. Cards. How do you give the cards to a player? You do like this, right? This is called pizar, lefazer. This is literally to distribute with an open hand. So that's the fe of pizar. So it says, pizar, your distribution, natan levyonim. You gave it to the destitutes. Sitkato, to the poor, yani. Sitkato omedet la'ad. The act of kindness, of charity that you gave out remains with you forever. What does it mean? There is a whole discussion in the halakha if mitzvot require kavanah or no. Obviously, Sefer Haredim writes that one of the requirements for a mitzvah to be considered a beautiful mitzvah, a well-done mitzvah, is the person needs to have the concentration of what I'm doing now. But interesting enough, in the mitzvah of tzedakah, the main goal of the charity is not so much the concentration, but it's actually the benefit. In other words, you gave a person charity, correct? Even though I was texting while I was giving, Nevertheless, the fact that I gave and I assisted a person in need, like regretfully we see here on a regular basis, especially in the winter. Sometimes between Shavuot and Selichot, nobody comes to collect. Everybody goes to deal.
The van don't work.
Because they know, they know where the customers are, right? Anyways, so Zohar Kadosh says the following. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in the world all kinds of people. People that give, people that receive. Interesting enough, to be a righteous person or the opposite, the Gemara writes, Hakol min hashamayim, chutz mi'irat shamayim. What is the meaning of this sentence? Shamayim gives the person a lot of things that happens in our life. Who your parents are, who you're going to marry, how many children you're going to have, livelihood, situations, somehow, somewhere, there is a pre-written version of us. But how we are going to become, spiritually speaking, how much we're going to be able to accomplish from the Yirat Shamayim level, the Gemara says, is up to the person. A person, as we have learned in the past, has the concept of Behira Hofshit. I have the freedom of choice. I can choose. I come, I do, I pray, etc. Comes the Zohar Kadosh, and it says an interesting concept. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the wealthy and the needy? Short answer, the Zohar says, because part of the zechut of the wealthy is to help the needy. In other words, the person, I'm going to use a mashal that I think we all can relate. God says, I need to invest money on the planet Earth. Okay, when you're going to invest money with someone, right? Let's say you speak, I'm not going to say names, you want to invest money with XYZ person. You check, is the person ne'eman? Is the person trustworthy? The person has a good track record? Are investors happy with this person? Or the moment that you mention his name, they'll tell you, keep it in the bank, get 0.02% a year, your money will be safer than with this fellow that is a good salesman. God forbid, Haz v'shalom. So God says, I need money I have money. I need to find a good investment. I can give you a few options if you like to invest from a spiritual angle. But forget about the spiritual angle at this moment. God says, I have money. I need good customers. So who does God give it to? People that Be'ezat Hashem will have the want and the will and the Yirat Shamayim to be generous towards others. And that's what the Zohar Kadosh introduces, this idea. And in a way, Yosef HaSaddik, if we think for a moment, this was the position that Yosef HaSaddik was put into. Not only to provide for Egypt, which imagine yourself that the entire country is at your fingertips, as the Pasuk said in last week's Berashah, Al picha ishak kol ami. Everybody needs to kiss your hands. And no one is the power to lift a finger without you. Yosef becomes the manager of the fund of Egypt. Yosef becomes the biggest property manager of the world in history. Why? Because every deed of the Egyptian homes belonged to Paro. When it came to food, people of Egypt, it says in the Midrash, that whenever they kept food, it spoiled. It didn't last. They were hachamim, they wanted to save food. But the moment they went to eat it, gone. They need to come to Yosef. They started to pay for the food the way Paro made the ruling. Ran out of money. What they do? They mortgage the homes. They ran out of the credit line of the homes. What do? Circumcision. Yosef requested from all of the Egyptians that they needed to be circumcised in order to eat. It was something that the Egyptians failed to do, because according to their tradition from Ishmael, technically speaking, they needed to be circumcised at the age of 13. But obviously, I'm not sure if the Egyptians are part of the Arab nation then, today, exactly, so it's a borderline. But why did Yosef requested from the Egyptians to circumcise themselves? I put that question on hold. So the Egyptians went to Paro and they said to Paro, this Jew is crazy. He wants us to circumcise. So what does Paro says? If the power of Yosef caused your food to be spoiled, and whatever word Yosef taught me and talked to me about my dreams and about the abundance of Egypt and the famine of Egypt became a reality, what if he decrees that who doesn't want to circumcise will not be able to eat? And guess what? If you don't eat for a day, 2 days, 3 days, how long can you last?
You die.
Kaddish. So what do? They listen to Yosef, and every Egyptian that came to ask for food was circumcised. And the question is, why? Short answer. Because Yosef knew that sooner or later his family will come down to Egypt to get food. That's simple. Now, if your family is going to come down to Egypt, eventually they're going to settle in Egypt. But what is the first thing that a person does when they settle into a new country? They want to just go with the flow. They don't want to be outcast. They don't want to look different or act different, right? They don't want to bring attention to themselves. So Yosef paved the way for the Jewish people that they will circumcise the children without having to worry about the public opinion of the Egyptians that they never heard of such a thing as circumcision, and the Jewish people became circumcised. Regretfully, I will tell you this topic of circumcision didn't last too long. It lasted for a few years until slavery became activated in Egypt.
The second.
Where do we learn this from? From the laws of Korban Pesach. So the Jewish people were in Egypt 210 years. From the 210 years, 86 were the harshest labor. So do the calculation. Levi was the last one to die from the brothers of Yosef. Yosef was the youngest one that died. Yosef died at the age of 110. Levi, I believe, 127. As long as Levi was alive, Yani, the grandfather of the Jewish nation, everybody kept the tradition, Milah, whatever. Once Levi died, that's when the slavery began. And as the years of slavery became more intense, the Berit Milah became something in the back burner. That's why when it came to the Korban Pesach, the Torah gives us in Perashat Bo the laws of the Berit Milah, and the Pasuk says, Bechol Arel lo yochal bo, umalta oto az yochal bo. The Torah tells us a couple of things. Number one, an uncircumcised person cannot eat from the Korban Pesach. Now, who is this uncircumcised person? So you may say, a Gentile. Since when Gentiles eat Korban Pesach? This referred to the Jewish people that were not circumcised. And then the Pasuk says, Umalta oto, then you will do the circumcision, and then you're going to be able to eat from the Korban Pesach. So having the Berit Milah was a mandatory requirement to be able to eat the Korban Pesach prior we left Egypt. Pause. Fast forward 40 years. We left Egypt, Hazako Baruch. We left Egypt with the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu. We had the Hegel, the decree of 40 years in the desert. Guess what? Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. We are ready to go to Israel under the leadership of Yoshua bin Nun. We need to do the Korban Pesach once again. Guess what? No one was circumcised. In the 40 years journey, there was no circumcision made to the Jewish people.
In the desert.
Excellent question. How come in the desert? Of course, excellent question. I'll give you one answer, and I think that this answer will take care of the question. The Jewish people did not have a schedule of the journey. They were traveling in the desert. We had 42 stops, the famous Membet Masaod. The halakha or the protocol would have been that a person that is circumcised for the first 3 days, you cannot travel. You cannot really move much. You stay home. What if suddenly God lifts the cloud, Ananaesh, and now we need to travel? What are you going to say to God? God, please, we're not ready. Wait 3 days. There is no such a thing, sakana. So therefore, no Berit Milah was done, just in case the journey will happen in the middle of the recovery. And guess what? Since there were thousands upon thousands of babies born on a regular basis, so what does that mean? That most likely more than one baby was born daily. So what does that mean then? That if everybody was born daily, the one that was born last Tuesday needs to have Milah today.
Correct.
And guess what? We will never move.
Every day.
We will ever get stuck in the desert. That's why the Berit Milah was not performed during the 40 years in the desert, and only through the time of Yehoshua, that's when the concept of the Berit Milah was reactivated in Am Israel. We were good. We did it, Baruch Hashem. But there were lapses of time in history that regretfully Berit Milah was not performed. Comes the Zohar Kadosh.
Right?
Repeat it again.
They didn't get the Torah yet, right?
Yeah, we got the Torah.
You got the Torah.
Of course. We got the Torah. But because, of course it is written, but because it is something that can cause physical danger to a child, so then it gets delayed. Like I had a case the other day. The Berit Milah, the Pidyon Ben was done before the Berit Milah.
Wow. How do you do that?
Very simple. The baby was born. He wasn't ready for the Berit Milah.
Jonas.
And other matters as well, regretfully. And guess what? The 31st day came, they did the Pidyon Ben. Because the Pidyon Ben, there is no mandatory. There is nothing to do with the body. Pidyon Ben is basically a halachic, biblical commandment, financial transaction between the parents of the baby and the Kohen. But Milah is direct to the body. So if God forbid, the body, right, the body is not proper, ready, etc., sometimes the baby is born a bit premature. That's why Berit Milah is never done before the complete 30 days of birth. Why? Because the first 30 days of the birth of a child is debatable if he's going to remain alive. God forbid. In other words, the first 30 days, let's call them in a refined English, is an adjustment period to the physical world. After the baby survives 30 complete days, it's called Bar Kayama. It's called a potential living individual. Before the end of the 30 days is questionable.
Wow.
Is that like the same 30 days at the end?
Repeat that again.
Is that like the 30 days at the end also?
I hear what you're saying. You are referring to an interesting concept that the Zohar explains that 30 days prior to the person's going back home, because this is a transient position, so to speak. The person starts getting the message, the feeling, etc. But we'll leave that for some other time. Madhav, you're not going anywhere, right?
Don't talk about it.
Used to be someone that used to sell life insurance policies. No names, please. No names. There are many people in the community in that industry. And whenever he would go visit people at night in their home, usually to sell insurance policy, and they will say, okay, let me think about it. His closing line will be, if you wake up in the morning, call me.
Double scale.
I will
You know how many he sold like that? God forbid. But I know, it sounds funny. But, and there is nothing wrong, by the way, to have life insurance. I'm just clearing the air.
What?
There is no halachic problem whatsoever. Actually, according to some sages, it is actually encouraged to have some type of life insurance. And not for buying a life insurance, your nemunah, it's a bit shaky, God forbid. If God forbid, somebody has an early departure, so then this, Shema Israel is right, but this somehow can give to the family certain cushion, certain peace of mind, certain tranquility,
Rabbi, one question.
etc.
The Raudan knew that we're not making the circumcisions?
Of course,
He's
that's
a
why.
course.
That's what God understood. God understood.
He's a course.
Why? Why? You have to understand one thing. That the Berit, you have to understand the following. I'm going to bring a short story about Moshe Rabbeinu, and perhaps this will clarify how come, if it's a biblical commandment, like you said, how come God approved it? Okay, you don't want to do the Berit Milah? No problem. Do it when you come to Israel 40 years from now. So remember Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe Rabbeinu was to the house of Yitro with his wife and his children. So it says that Moshe Rabbeinu did not circumcise his children. That's what's clearly. The Pasuk says, Hatan damim lamulot. Now, so the snake came, right? And what did the snake do? Swallow Moshe Rabbeinu through the Berit Milah. What did Tzipporah do? She took the knife, she took a rock, and did the Berit Milah. What was the background of that incident? Moshe Rabbeinu finally agrees to redeem the Jewish people. After a week of negotiation between God and Moshe Rabbeinu finally says, God, you know what? Do what you want. 1 week. So what Moshe Rabbeinu says, now I'm going to redeem the Jewish people. How can I leave my wife and children alone? I'm going to take them with me. God says to Moshe, Stana shweye. We are going to redeem the Jewish people. Are you going to bring your wife and kids? More people to worry about? You're going to worry about your wife, your kids, and the millions of people that you need to relieve? Leave your wife and kids behind and go by yourself. Okay. So what do we see here? That sometimes a person needs to make decisions that even from the Torah may not make sense. But if we're dealing with the matters of physical danger, the way the Lechat calls it, pikuach nefesh, which is the foundation of Hatzalah protocols, and the doctor protocols, and hospital protocols, and desecrating Shabbat, or eating in Yom Kippur, God forbid, is a matter of life and death. What do? Suddenly, all the parameters of the halakha, they take a step back. And this is what happened in the desert. Imagine if we need to circumcise. You have to understand, staying in the desert was a catch-22 outcome. Number one, we should have been in Israel a few days after we left Egypt. We blew it with the Egel, with the sin of the golden calf. That was strike number one. Strike number two, after the golden calf, that Moshe negotiated forgiveness or a payment plan. Let's call it, it wasn't forgiveness. It was forgiveness because there was no automatic execution. Moshe Rabbeinu activated a payment plan between God and the Jewish people. But then, we really blew it with the story of the spies, the Meragelim. And yet, we blew it, but guess what? That extended the life of Moshe Rabbeinu for 40 years. Because if that doesn't happen, Moshe Rabbeinu, with the spies, Moshe Rabbeinu cannot go into Israel. So we understand what happened. We have 40 years of delay in the desert. For what purpose? To expand the life of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Makes sense now.
A lot of things make sense. It's just a matter of putting the pieces of the puzzle of the Torah together. And this was, in a way, the opening statement of the Zohar of today concerning Yosef HaSadik. Yosef HaSadik has a question. What do I do? Do I expose myself and perhaps I may be killed? Or I protect my life but I killed my brothers emotionally by embarrassing them in front of the Egyptians. You understand? It's not a simple question. It's like somebody says, you know what? Let's make a deal. I can only meet you Saturday morning. It's a $1 million deal. Baruch Hashem, all of us here in the room and in Torah, Tzaddikim, say, forget about it.
Sunday.
Right, see you Sunday, see you Friday morning. But somebody that may not be so strong, it says, no, God sent it to me, I have to do it. God forbid. I'm going to bring a guy to bring me, to sign for me. They're going to find every imaginable shtick to do all the loopholes available in the books to serve, to save themselves. So Yosef HaSaddik tells us, basically, the importance of doing the right thing at the right time, even though may not make sense. Technically, there is a concept that a person is not allowed to put themselves in sakana. En somchim ala nes, the Gemara says. You can't put yourself in a dangerous situation banking that God is going to save me. No, there is a mitzvah of doing the hishtadlut, doing the basic physical human effort to protect yourself. Imagine yourself, you got stuck a bit in the office and you want to make it to Mincha and Arvit on time. And what do you say? What's the big deal? I'm going to go on the shoulder on 95 and I'm going to make it on time. That's irresponsible. That's not allowed.
On the shoulder.
On the shoulder, because no, you're a Hasid. You want to pray with a minyan. But no, God forbid, anything that can bring danger, anything that can bring danger to others, or something like Yosef, you need to take a step back and do the right thing. And that's how the Zohar Kadosh explains where was the greatness of Yosef HaSaddik. Yosef HaSaddik didn't only was happy, oh look, now I'm the viceroy of Egypt, you can't do anything without my blessing. No, Yosef HaSaddik is a Saddik. Why is he called a Saddik? Number one, because of his Irat Shamayim. Number two, because of his self-control when it came to the topic of the Berit Milah, which is the topic of Yesod, etc. And number three, because he thought of others instead of thinking of him. And this is the opening statement of the Zohar HaKadosh of today. My dear friends, I wish everybody to have a lovely, lovely day. We'll have a Spanish class in a few minutes via itorah.com. So we'll see you later. Be'ezat Hashem. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך